Yeah, there we go. Yep, and it's good. It's recording. All right. So thank you again, Jason, for coming in and speaking with my class. Just for the record, do you mind spelling your name and offering your title?
My name is Jason Roberson, Jason, as in boy, Erson. I am currently serving as the Director of Strength and Conditioning here at Ball State University.
And how long have you been the director?
I became the director back in 2006. I left Drake University.
And you mentioned Drake. I saw that your alma mater is Upper Iowa University, and your master's degree came from Loris in Dubuque. So would you call Iowa your stomping grounds?
No, actually. So my father was in the military, so I've lived all over the U.S. I've lived in, I think, 10, maybe 10 states, and 10 different locations. I've lived on both coasts and Midwests, and so Iowa is just the latest in the long line of different places I've lived.
Awesome. So from your master's degree, what courses did you take, or types of courses did you take that would lend to your current position?
So the strong things in my courses were anatomy, obviously physiology, and biomechanics. The course that I felt was the most impactful was actually understanding neural anatomy, understanding why the body does what it does and how it does what it does. One of the greatest classes I took was talking about excitation. So if I want to get an athlete riled up and I want to get him ready to go, I know that I need to increase the noise in the room. I need to increase the lighting in the room, and I need to make sure that their pupils are dilated and their hands are clammy, warm and clammy, not cold and clammy. Because that means they have vasodilation and their body is facilitated and they're ready to pick up big heavy weights.
Wow, vasodilation.
Vasodilation.
Dilation. Okay.
Your pupils are dilated.
Okay.
And then your veins are opened up.
So do you just like kind of walk around and look for that?
I do. So one of the techniques I used to do, I used to work with basketball. Basketball is one of those sports where the guys seem like they're really brave. They know what they're doing, but most of them are scared every single game. And so I walk around and give them a handshake.
Oh, okay. Shake
their hand and look in their eyes. The handshakes tell me what their hands are doing, how cold their hands are. If their hands are warm, I know they're vasodilated, their veins are open, their blood is flowing well. And if their pupils are dilated, I know they've reached a state of excitation. And if their pupils are low and their hands are cold, I'll tell them they need to get more warmed up, and we'll take them through some stuff to get them warmed up. But if everything is set up properly, then I'm like, all right, go ahead, have fun.
Interesting. You said that they tend to be scared.
Oh yeah.
Go on. What do you mean by that?
Well, most athletes are very nervous before events. It's not scared as far as like they're going to get hurt of that nature, but it's scared just they want to do well. Most athletes are extroverts, and so they're performing. They're doing something for other people. They want the attention of other people, and that sounds selfish, but it's just who we are. Like as an athlete, you're performing because you want to do really, really well. And the scared or nervousness, I would say, it comes mostly from the desire to not fail. I think Kobe put it, I don't fear failure, I feel not being as successful as I want to be. But I think most athletes haven't reached that level. I think most athletes fear failure versus fearing doing really, really well.
Yeah, from a tennis perspective, Nadal, I don't fear losing.
Fear losing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what about sports then for you? Which ones did you play, if any?
So in high school, I wrestled, played football, I ran track, and I was a weightlifter. And then in college, I played football, I wrestled, I ran track, and I played soccer 1 year.
Any of those your favorite?
Wrestling, by far. I started wrestling when I was 4 years old, and I finished when I was 22. And then I recently got the chance to coach at Burris High School.
Oh, sure.
Years, so that was a lot of fun.
Okay, I didn't know that. Burris High School.
Well, middle school, I guess it was middle school.
Or Burris Middle School for wrestling.
For wrestling.
Let's see. Well, what's an interaction then, or an exchange that you once had with one of your coaches that at that time you thought was unnecessary or too much, but in the end it was actually useful advice for you?
I thought about that way over. So in high school, can't say I was stubborn or pig-headed, but in high school, I did things one way, and until I was proven otherwise, that's how I did them. So I had a high school football coach who would just basically pull me around the field by my face mask and yell and scream at me, and take me exactly where I was supposed to be. And at the time, it felt a bit excessive, but then reading afterwards, like, oh, he just realized how to get to me. It wasn't saying it. It was putting me where I needed to be. I mean, maybe it didn't have to be done by my face mask, but he got the message across, and I learned the message quite quickly.
Okay. And what would be a memorable moment for you as an athlete?
The most memorable moment for me, and it wasn't actually, in sport, we were at a winter wrestling tournament, and my coach, Mike McCready, was a former Olympian, former Pan American. We're sitting in the stands, and the name that I'm about to say, most of you'll know, is Dan Gable, the Iowa wrestling coach, like the champion Iowa wrestling coach. He's walking on the field because we're at University of Northern Iowa, so we were wrestling in the Unidome. And he's walking on the field, and my coach is sitting two seats down from me. And Dan Gable starts yelling, Mike. And I remember just thinking, like, Dan Gable's calling Coach McCready. And Mike goes, What do you want? And I'm like, holy crap, he talks to Dan Gable that way? And so it was the realization that if someone's your hero, that doesn't make them a hero. It just means that you idolize them, but other people don't necessarily idolize them. And so it kind of gave me perspective on people are just people.
Well, and since you went down that road, I'm kind of curious, what's your take on name, image, likeness then?
So I may be controversial. I'm all for it. And this is the reason being. There are too many young men and women who work really hard, and the universities profit off that.
Yeah.
And it's because of that profit that I think that profit should be shared with the athletes that do that. Now, how do we make it equitable? That's the difficult question. And I think that's what the NCAA is working through right now. But in my opinion, I think this is a direction that athletes or college sports has needed to go for a very long time.
If you were in charge of the NCAA, how would you make it equitable?
Oh, geez. I think the aspect that the student athletes are taking on now, which is using social media to create dollars, I think that might be the level playing ground, because everyone has access to social media. Everyone can build a following. Now, your personal notoriety is going to affect how fast you grow your base, but everyone has the opportunity to be out there. When you leave it to administration or you leave it to coaches, there's too many times when we become fixated on an athlete who happens to be like the star athlete of the team, and so we become fixated on that athlete, and we forget that this kid out here did just as much work and put in just as much time, but because they're not the one that's getting all the notoriety, that they're kind of set in the dark. Whereas with social media, the kids, it's in their own hands. They get to do what they need to do or want to do if that's their desire, to bring dollars in for themselves.
You work with a lot of players, obviously middle school and then college athletes. So what would you identify as maybe some of the larger, more noticeable differences between middle school athletes and collegiate athletes you coach?
Good question. We'll start with negative and the positive. The negative is this: kids still love the sport. I work with too many college kids who hate the sport. They do it because they're good at it. They do it because that's their avenue, if I could say. Positive would be, as skill develops, the type of work that needs to be done has to change. And I think most college kids get that. They start to understand that I don't have to do the same things that I did when I was in middle school. I can break skill down into its more finite pieces and start making it look like I put the pieces of the puzzle together and I can start seeing the puzzle. When you're a kid, all you can see is the edges of the piece that you're holding. If I'm teaching a kid a double leg takedown, they can't see from the setup to the maneuver, to the shots, to the lift, to the drive. All they can see is, okay, I need to get this right foot here. And that's about as far as they can see. And then once they get that right foot there, now I know I need to lower my level. And once I've lowered my level, if their hips are still in the right place and their foot stays in the right place, now I can take my penetration step. And once that penetration step and I've got their leg secured, now I can, and they didn't sprawl too hard on me. They didn't knock me down. If I stay in the right position, now I can lift and now I can dump. And so they're only seeing like bits and pieces of the puzzle at a time. Whereas the college kids, because they're so good at every component, they now can see the puzzle for its whole self, and they know exactly how to maneuver the pieces. So that's that training aspect. They know how to maneuver the pieces to get the picture together as fast as possible.
What drives, do you think, their hatred for the sport?
Oh, just the pounding and the time, like the time commitment that athletes have is horribly long, and it's necessary. In order to be good, you have to have time. You know, there's never been an athlete. No one's born. Every athlete who's ever become really good made themselves an athlete. They had to practice. They had to work hard. They had to train. They had to eat right. They had to sleep right. If you don't do those things, it doesn't happen. You know, we always look at athletes. We'll take like a Barry Sanders. You know, it's like, oh, he's this great running back, but you didn't see the 20 years prior to that. All of the work, the daily work that man put in to be that fast, to be able to change directions that fast, to be able to decelerate and reaccelerate that fast. All you saw was practice or the games. All you saw was the games. And so we assume like, oh, he was born like that. No, he wasn't born.
Well, and for the record, Barry Sanders, running back for Detroit.
I saw my Lions guy.
Yeah, okay. All right,
let's go.
Yeah. Very cool. Now, I don't know, that hate the sport part, I think is an interesting concept. You know, is that more evident in some sports over others?
I'm sure. There are sports where there's not as much physical pounding, and so those athletes may not have as much hatred towards sport. The number of kids who graduate and go, "I'll never play this again. I'll never do it," is shocking to me. It's a true eye opener. And so it's not obviously always everyone, but there's a lot of athletes that get to college and they're done. They're mentally done, physically done. Yeah, they just simply battle through.
So is it the NIL that keeps them into the sport, or what keeps them going and motivated?
Going back to what I first said about athletes, they're extroverts. They need that external factor to drive. They need that external factor to keep going forward. And that what will happen is they will find at a point when they're done with their sport, they'll find something else to shift their attention to drive for, that's why you'll see a lot of athletes who are really good in business, or a lot of athletes who are really good in sales or really good in this. They have this external component to drive for. That's all sport is that, you know, I want to be good because if I'm good, I'll score more points. If I'm good, I'll get more takedowns. If I'm good, I can strike these batters out. If I'm good, I hit these more 3-pointers. You know, and so there's always this external factor of, you know, here's what I want to do and here's how I want to do it.
If I'm good, I'll have success.
If I'm good, I'll have success.
You know, or I don't have to fear as much the losing part of it.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, then that begs the question. I mean, that can't be easy to negotiate that and that pressure to perform, pressure to achieve. So what are current needs that you commonly notice among collegiate student athletes?
Collegiate athletes take their mental well-being more serious than any time I've ever seen in the past.
How so?
I have athletes who will say, "Coach, I need a day off. I need to relax for a day. If I don't do this, I'm not going to do it." And you know, I've never heard of an athlete in the past doing that. I certainly have never even contemplated making that call to a coach. Say, I just don't feel like I could do this today. You know, it's always, no matter how you feel, no matter what's going on, how your body feels, you will be at practice and you will do your best. Athletes today understand that, you know what, if I'm not giving my best, then I need to take a step back, relax until I can give my best. And progress is made that way. You know, kids get better when they're doing that. I know a lot of coaches will look at that, and right now it's seen as a negative amongst a lot of coaches because, you know, anyone my age, 30 years old and older, they went through a period where it was like, you will do this. There is no question. I've got a feeling that as we start to understand this more and get better at understanding, you know, giving someone a mental break, giving someone a physical break is only going to do good for them. It's not going to hurt them. So I think coaches over the years will get better at understanding that this is a necessary thing. I don't need you at practice today. I need you in the game next week. And I know if I push you today, then your performance in the game is going to suffer or can suffer. I guess you can't predict the future. And so by understanding that, I think that we're going to see better sports. I think we're going to see, perhaps even longer careers because kids don't drive themselves into the dirt.
I get burned out.
Get burned out.
I mean, going back to what you said, though, it sounds like it's getting better, but there's still some dissonance maybe between
For sure.
some coaches. So I'm kind of curious how, maybe you, if you want to personalize it, otherwise, if you've witnessed other coaches' reaction when a player brings up some mental health concerns. I'm kind of curious how that conversation goes, as you can recall.
I can't speak on anybody else's account, behalf. Myself, my initial reaction, because I was very much a yes sir, yes ma'am, no sir, person growing up, that I never questioned a coach, not once. Not one time in my ever career did I ever question a coach. And because of that, I became a coach. When I first started coaching, I became a coach who thought that that's how it's supposed to be. For the first 10 years of my career, I would get mad if an athlete used my first name. And because it was that respect thing, oh, you must respect me. And it started to dawn on me, like, that's just bravado, that's just persona. That has nothing to do with you being a coach. It has nothing to do with you helping the athletes out. And so what I've seen is when I allow athletes to see me as a person, then they show me who they are as a person. And I'm able to more effectively help them get through those hard times. In fact, more effectively help them, bridge those gaps of not performing well. My body feels terrible. My mind feels terrible because I'm not performing well, and my body feels terrible. Why do I continue? And so there's been several occasions where I'm speaking to athletes, and it's been the reassurance of this is all just temporary. Like you're going to live a long, beautiful life after all of this. Don't put as much pressure on yourself as you're putting on yourself. But once we have that discussion, they seem to relax and understand that, I get to play a game, I get to have fun. And so yeah, that's.
And you've been a coach, as I found out from just my own research since 2000. So 24 years, going on 25, quarter of a century, basically, going all the way back to your time as a GA, graduate assistant. So you kind of mentioned through the mental health conversation, that's one area where you've had to adjust as a coach in that time span. Where else might you have had to adjust?
Well, the field's changed a ton in the time that I've been a strength coach. In 24 years, the field of strength and conditioning has seen new enlightenment that had never been seen before. Our understanding of the human body has gone up. Our understanding of sport development has gone up. And so there's been numerous changes that we've gone through. I think probably for us, the biggest change that we've gone through is the amount of technology that's come into the field. When I first got started, to determine whether or not an athlete was moving a weight fast enough, you just guessed, oh, it looks fast enough. And if we're working on power, we can designate how many meters per second you're moving a specific load to find out if you're being powerful or not. And powerful being a very specific word versus you're producing force or producing pure velocity. And so if I want you to develop power, I need you moving between, I think 1.7 meters per second and 0.7 meters per second and 0.95 meters per second, of whatever given load you have on your back or in your hands, or whatever. And so that was unable to be done when I first got in the field, whereas now we know, I know exactly how fast you're moving. Then there's also load progression. So we use Catapult, and there's another system that's out right now, I'm not familiar with it at the moment, that measures how much running you've done, how much pounding you have on your body, your heart rate. They monitor your heart rate as you're going throughout the day or throughout the practice and workout. And it gives you this player load that says this athlete is still relatively fresh. This athlete is really overworked, and these 5 athletes are right in the middle. So they're working hard, but they've probably still got more in them. And so it's the technology has helped us get to the point where we're like, you know what? I think athlete B needs a day. They need a day to relax or to pull back as far as the volume that work that they're doing. Whereas athlete A and athlete C, D, and E are fine. They can continue to work at maximum load.
Do you think that the abundance of technology at all contributes to some of the pressure to perform, that eventual burnout that we were talking about earlier? Is there any link in your opinion?
I would say it's the contrary.
Okay.
Knowing exactly what's going on. So if I had an athlete they're stressed about their squat, we'll just use that as an example, stressed about their squat, and they're really trying to get this certain load. When I put them on a Tendo unit or any accelerometer, when I put them on an accelerometer and I say, I need you, all I'm worried about is you moving at 0.75 meters per second. And they always feel like they're slow. Like, coach, I'm just not moving it well. So I put them on the accelerometer. I see, 0.82, 0.83, 0.81. Like, you're above what I want you to go. You're doing really, really well. And so there's more reinvigoration of that. With the catapult system, by using systems like that, we're getting better at looking at athletes and going, you need a day off, physically need a day off. And whereas before it was, no, today's Wednesday, we train on Wednesday, let's go, and I would say it's the opposite. I think more athletes are being better taken care of with technology than was before. I'm not saying technology is the end all be all. I'm not saying you can't do this job without technology, but I am saying that our understanding and the proper use of the technology is helping athletes more than hurting.
How did you go then from wrestling? You said, you stopped at age 22. How did you go from athlete, wrestler, presumably collegiate wrestler, to strength and conditioning coach?
Oh, I fell backwards into it. I was supposed to go to law school. I was an English literature major, and I had intentions of going into law. I was studying for my LSATs. On the day that during that summer, my sophomore going into my junior summer, junior summer going into my senior summer, I interned for a corporate lawyer. He did contract law. This is back in Jacksonville, Florida. Just for a week, I just went and shadowed him for a week, and discovered that was not the life I wanted to live. The amount that he did and the amount of time that he spent away from his family and friends did not add up to me. It wasn't one of those things, right? So I decided that I need to do something else. Graduated college, still had no idea what I wanted to do. Got my English literature degree. That helped out a lot. And then a buddy of mine. So I had been just interested in bodybuilding for a number of years. So after I graduated, I did a bodybuilding show. This is my senior year, the spring of my senior year. I did a bodybuilding show, and one of the gentlemen that helped me prepare for that show, his name is Jim Romagna. When I graduated and went home, I was at home for 2/3 of a year, and then I suddenly got a phone call, and he's like, "Hey, have you ever thought about going back to school to be a strength and conditioning coach?" And I came from Division III. We did not have strength and conditioning coach. Your football coach was your strength coach. Your wrestling coach was your strength coach. Your track coach was your strength coach. And so we didn't have this position at that level back at that time. I didn't like what I was doing. I was selling security systems, and so didn't care for that at all. So I was like, sure, let's do this, whatever, see what happens. And I fell in love with it. I don't know that I could have chosen a career for myself that I'm more suited for. I really love the human body. I love the manipulation of the human body. That's what got me into bodybuilding was, how can I get bigger? How can I improve this muscle group? How can I improve, my stamina? How can I improve these things? How can I lift more weight, like heavier, stronger? And so my enjoyment of manipulating the human body was deeply rooted in this field. I had no idea, never even knew it existed. And so I can say I 100% fell backwards into this career, but I have loved every minute of it.
Like 2 more questions for you. So one of them is in relation to what you just said about the human body. Earlier, you also mentioned about how in the last quarter century, we've learned a lot more about the human body. So what are some examples of what we've learned in the sports profession, just in general, about the human body?
So something we've learned, the human body, mammalian cells, not just us, are multinucleated, which means we have more than one nucleus per cell. The beauty of that is that information is passed down. And so the reason why it's important, and then let me explain why. This is a reason why it's incredibly important to be strong and healthy, or be what you want to be at this age, because once you've done it, your body actually knows how to do it again. And so the first time is always the hard time. So if you decide at age 40 you want to get in shape because you've not done anything for the past 40 years, it's going to be incredibly hard. But if you worked out really hard once when you were in your teens or your 20s, now your body has that nucleation. They have the information needed to redo those things, to get back to who you were. And so that's one of the things we now understand, that the reason why we see old athletes who haven't done anything for 5-10 years, and all of a sudden they get back in shape and they're running really fast, jumping really high. I'm like, well, we now know why we can do that. You know, it's not just because they worked really hard, you know, to get there with that time. You know, it's because they built their body up at one point in time. Their body now remembers how to do that again.
So it sounds like you'd almost, in your position, almost like a medical professional, medical doctor, you need to have their like athletic history, just like you would have to have their medical history to come up with a routine, a regimen for them that would be appropriate given their history, their athletic history.
It absolutely helps. Yeah. The more I know about their past, the easier it is for me to train them for the future. Yeah.
All right. Then the other question, the last question I had is that we were talking about social media and athletes, you know, talking in relation to NIL. So then it got me thinking, okay, if you were to tweet your coaching philosophy, so 280 characters or less, how would you describe that philosophy?
My philosophy in coaching is connect with the athlete in such a way that they find their power, their greatest successes in anything they're doing. And so I use what I do to help them understand that if you want to run faster, let's do this. If you want to jump higher, let's do this. If you feel like you're getting pushed around, let's do this. You know, so by getting to know the athlete, getting to know what they want, like what their desires are within their sport. I think I'm way over 280 characters.
That's all right. Elon will let it go. He'll let it go.
And so I use what I do to bring the best out of my athletes.
Good. So 9:33 on here. I told you I'd stop right about now. You got about 10 minutes. We can give you 10 minutes worth of questions that you may want to ask him.
What would you say is the hardest sport to like train? Because I ran cross country stuff, but I also wrestled. So like I know that conditioning factor is different. Like you can have great cardio and run a cross country track, but the moment you go on a football field or you wrestle, you're gonna be gassed in like 5 minutes.
Absolutely. Those two are actually really easy to train. Force production being the one factor that you don't really pay attention to in cross country that you do need in wrestling and football. So it's the amount of time that the muscles turned on. So we simply just add a few more sets, add a few more reps. And I prefer sets than reps because I can keep the intensity much higher. The most difficult sport to train are actually high skill sports: baseball, basketball, golf, tennis. The reason why those are very difficult is because I can improve an athlete's vert, sprint time, bench press time, squat time, clean. I can improve all of their matrix, and they'll still not be good at their sport. There's never been a track athlete, say a thrower. If I improve your ability to squat, clean, and bench, you're going to throw the ball farther. Period. Cross country. If I improve your ability to put energy into the ground, you're going to run faster because that's all it is. It's jumping from one foot to the next. In wrestling, if I improve your ability to maintain the grip without becoming fatigued, by improving ability to pull without becoming fatigued, you're going to become a better wrestler. Does that make sense? And so the hardest sports to work with are actually high skill sports, simply because there's little to no carryover from the court to the weight room. Yes, sir.
How would you go about training like a multi-sport athlete who's got to be like at high levels in the fall, spring?
Ooh, that's a good question. We would definitely get onto an undulating training system. And what that means is there's times and periods where I'm going to go a low intensity, a little bit higher volume. That's going to increase their muscle mass. We need muscle mass because that falls off as the more you train, the more you work out. Well, sort of practice-wise, the more you practice train, you're going to lose some muscle mass. So we need to rebuild that muscle mass periodically. And then we're going to go higher periods where we're doing super high intensity, but the volume is low. That improves my power, strength, and speed, my velocity. And so through an undulating training system, I think we can maintain a high level performance. What I would not do is I would not try to peak that athlete. When you take an athlete, so when we've all just watched the Olympics this past summer, those athletes were put on a progression where their objective in their training was to peak over a given certain amount of time, a given period. When you do that, you have this huge fall off afterwards. So if you took all the Olympic athletes, not all of them, but if you took the highest level Olympic athletes and then retested them in their sports 2 weeks after the Olympics were over, they wouldn't perform as well, because all of their training had them geared up for that. So I wouldn't do that with that kind of athlete. An athlete that's training year round, I would do an undulating training, which will create a linear progression, but it's only when you pull back to 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, 12 months, that you start to see this linear progression. But when you look at, say, the week, the month, you'll see these small undulations going on. And that'll help, without doing too much at any point in time to hurt them. Thank you. Other questions? Yes, sir.
How would you train an athlete that comes in that is considered high skilled, but they're behind in the strength category?
So we'll talk about baseball, for example. We have a lot of pitchers. The first thing is that I have to worry about, I cannot injure this athlete. If they're a high skill athlete and they're a highly touted athlete, like the coach really wants them, they need them on the team, then I have to be incredibly cautious. So I start first with caution. I know that time will catch up, whereas rushing an athlete will usually result in something bad happening. And so I start very slow. I look at the athlete's technique. Number one, the technique will tell me how well they can load their bodies without getting hurt. If they have good technique, then we move on to building their strength. That will be done slowly, but we will, because I know that I need to get it in a 4-year period, I will be slightly more aggressive than I would be if I know that by 8 to 10 years of time. So that would be. Yes, sir.
So how would you train an athlete who is coming off an injury? How would you build their strength back up to before they got injured?
Excellent question. The first thing we do is when they're released from PT, physical therapy, to me, and the athletic trainers build them back up to their now a normal human being, I need to get them back to game speed. So the first thing we do is make sure their range of motion is where it's supposed to be. So if it was a joint injury, I want to make sure that joint can go through its full range of motion without any pain. If it's a muscular injury, I want to make sure they can stretch that muscle through its full range of motion without any discomfort. Once those things are taken care of, then we slowly begin to build work capacity. Work capacity is the body's ability to contract a muscle over and over and over again without becoming fatigued. When you can contract a muscle over and over again without being fatigued, then we can start putting, if it's an athlete that needs high velocity, then we'll start working much faster stuff, so jumping and sprinting. If it's an athlete that needs heavy force production, then we start getting them stronger again. And then if it's an athlete that needs power, then we're going to work on all three. So we're going to work on force production and high velocity, which can give us that power. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So you do a lot of talking about the mental health aspect of things. What about strictly mentality? If an athlete comes in, there's not putting in certain levels of effort, how do you kind of push them in that direction to, I don't know, is that something that's all on them, or is there anything you can do to help?
I always tell my athletes that I cannot and will not make you do anything. You're adults. All the kids I work with are adults. So it is 100% on them. Now, with that said, I will have conversations with these athletes to get them to understand how what we're doing in the weight room will benefit them on the track, on the field of play. I can tell you, I had track athletes who we do a movement called clean. Sometimes we'll do a clean and jerk, but mostly we'll do cleans. The clean puts a lot of force into the ground in a short amount of time. That's sprinting. That's all that sprinting is. This young lady did not like doing cleans and did not want to do cleans and refused to pick up any heavy weight. Unfortunately, if you don't pick up heavy enough weight to get a training effect from it, then you're just kind of wasting your time. I did not ever make her do cleans. However, what she saw was her classmates excelling because all of her classmates were working hard. And so I would point to them and say, hey, did you notice that this young lady's clean went from 20 kilos to 40 kilos and now she's on to 60 kilos? Her time dropped by 2/10 from that moment. Through her observation and through our conversation, she found that, you know what, maybe I need to try a little harder. But at no point in time did I ever say she needed to try harder. She discovered that what was happening was because she wasn't improving herself, her times were never dropping. So once she figured that out, she started working hard. She ended up being one of my better kids in the that year. Yeah. Anything else? Yes, sir.
So let's say football, for example.
Mhm.
Let's say like you're getting like a brand new set of freshmen.
Okay.
And that kid has never lifted. What is like the first thing that you have to do?
The first thing I prefer to do is movement. Unfortunately, we have to deal with coaches who really are excited about getting them in the weight room, getting them lifting weights. If I had my perfect setup, the first thing I would do is analyze movement. How well do you move? Can you hinge? Can you squat? Can you put your hands over your head? Can you rotate? Can you laterally flex? Can you forward and extend? If you can go through good ranges of motion, your body does not have any issues, then we will start to slowly load the weight. I prefer to teach every movement with a PVC pipe. Bench press, clean, squats, everything. Perfectly light. If you cannot control your body, you cannot control a bar. And so we want the movement to happen first. The reward for doing a movement well is weight, not the opposite. And so I would set them up with movement first, teach the mechanics that I want them to teach them, and then start loading a bar to get them to understand the force or velocity that needs to be done. You expect me to say kill him? You expect me to say kill him?
I've had coaches that were like,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, playing
Philosophies are
football-
many.
Yeah, playing football, you have a defense coach. Crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Quarterback coach.
Do you, last two questions. Go ahead.
Yes.
The difference between coaching like middle school and college is these kids still love it and these kids don't. So do you think that the kids that start super early versus kids who start, let's say, like beginning of high school, do you think those high school kids are gonna have more love for the sport still rather than the kids who started in elementary school?
I don't think it's time. I think it's what we do to athletes. I started wrestling when I was 4 and I still love it to this day. I would go wrestle today if I could. I think rather if you pay attention to, or if you've seen club sports, kids in club sports right now, like they'll start when they're 7, 8 years old. They're practicing 2 to 3 times a week and they're playing every single weekend. I don't think it's how early they start. I think it's how much we put on these athletes at a very young age. And very few sports today and very few coaches that I observe, sport coaches that I observe, are about fun. Most of them are about winning. And it makes no sense. There are no scholarships that are handed out at 6 years old. There are no scholarships handed out in middle school, and so when you take the fun out of it, that's what a sport is. It's a game. That's just it. It's a game. No lives are being saved. No, wars are being stopped. Although I guess the Christmas soccer game was the one that did stop, but that was for Christmas. That had nothing to do with the war. So I think kids need to understand that our coaches and parents, this is more important, the coaches and parents need to understand that kids still need to be kids. They need time to play. They need time to relax. They need time to be themselves. They need time for self-exploration versus always being told what to do. I think the burnout comes. I think the hatred for the sport comes when they've been told by someone for the past 10 years, 15 years, in some of these kids' examples, what to do, when to do it, where to do it, how to do it. You just get tired of it. You just want to do your own thing. And I think that's where the burnout comes. When I say they don't love the sport anymore, I don't think they truly hate the sport. I think they hate the situation that they're in.
Well, last one.
So, say one of the kids that you're training is very strong, but they don't have a long range of motion. How would you change that?
I'm going to answer this question with my own folly. I did not like yoga for a very long time. I thought yoga was stupid. It probably wasn't until my 40s that I realized that yoga, although I do not call it exercise, and I don't call it exercise out of spite or anything like that, I think yoga is its own thing. Like, it is its own encompassing thing. But I think every human should do yoga. I truly, to the bottom of my soul, believe that yoga is important for all of us. This is the number one reason why we sit like this. That's not what the human body was meant to do. We're never meant to sit like this. That's why we're all stiff. And so the first thing I would do with that athlete is start doing yoga with them to help improve their range of motion. Because what will happen is, even though being really tight and restricted helps them pick up more weights, it's also going to shorten their careers. You have a fluid called synovial fluid that surrounds your joints. The less you use that joint, the less that synovial fluid gets lubricated or gets distributed. And so then you build up these adhesions, and now the joint doesn't like to move very far. And so by doing yoga, you're redistributing that synovial fluid. You're redistributing hyaluronic fluid, which is the fluid that's in between the connective tissues of the human body. That's what lubricates our movements. And so the first thing I would have the athlete do is yoga, and the last thing I would have to do is yoga.
All right. Thank you for your time. I'm